When you think about the word community, you come up with a lot of different definitions. The one that I have decided to choose is just a group of people who are working towards a common goal. Because of that, we have a lot of small communities, large communities, and communities within communities. But the one that I've chosen to talk about today is that of pediatric healthcare. I think that this is really important because even though we have pediatric healthcare found in the United States, it's not as prominent as you actually think it would be. We have the opinion and the idea that it is prominent due to the fact that Kansas City has a ton of pediatric dentist offices, and we have Children's Mercy and all these different other specialties that are only for kids, but in reality, it's not like that nationwide. And I think that if we were to have pediatric healthcare be found more across the entire United States, we'd have a lower mortality rate, we'd have an increase of happiness in children because they're not scared to go to the doctor, and we're going to just have fewer complications in general. The first area of where this can be seen is in pediatric hospitals. So according to the About section of Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia was the first hospital to have a pediatric focus. They did this according to the About section due to the fact that there was such a high mortality rate in kids, which makes complete sense. I mean, obviously, if kids are getting sick and they're passing away, you want to fix that. But another thing that they also talked about was the creation of this hospital allowed for research that solely focused on these kids, which allowed for them to better understand the diseases happening in the human body of children, and then thus probably later on in adults as well. But the same disease can treat me differently as it can treat a 3-year-old little girl. And that's just how the body works. And so by having research facilities just to focus on these kids, they're going to start getting better a lot quicker, which is what they saw, and hence why we have more pediatric hospitals found across the United States. That also led to an advance in medicine in general with like penicillin and different drugs, which I think is really important. But overall, the children's hospitals are just making such an impact in kids today because mainly the large range of specialties that we have. So you have heart surgeons and allergists and dietitians and all these different types of doctors that only work on kids. They specialize in pediatrics. And that's so important because they're going to only see kids, so they're going to be more apt to have a successful heart transplant than a doctor who's seeing a 60-year-old patient one day, a 30-year-old patient the next day, and then a 4-year-old the next day. They're not going to be as consistent in their work, which isn't against them. It's just kind of how it is. But it also allows the children, which I think is the other half, like missing piece of the puzzle as to why it's so successful, is the children are more comfortable. And if you're not terrified to go into the doctor because you see all like these jungle gyms or these stuffed animals, you're not going to be terrified. And by having a lower stress level, your body's going to be able to focus on fixing itself instead of dealing with that fight or flight syndrome that you're terrified and you're wanting to run out of here because you just want your mom because you're 3 years old and you don't like the doctor with the mask poking at your stomach. And so I just think overall, it's made a really large impact. And I mean, it's personally made an impact in my life. I talked about in my introduction speech about me having scoliosis. And I went to Children's Mercy for that. And I felt more comfortable because the doctor talked in a way that I could understand. I mean, I was in 6th grade. I didn't know what the heck it meant to have a curved spine, other than my spine wasn't straight like all the other kids were. And I thought I was weird. But he just explained it in a way that made me feel more comfortable. And because of that, I now volunteer in Children's Mercy once a week. And you can just see the way that these kids are just reacting differently to the doctors because they're not scared. And they're excited whenever I come in, even if I have a mask on my face, because I just want to color, which I think is really cool. That being said, we also need to think about the fact that while it's becoming more common for pediatric hospitals to be present, pediatric dentistry is still a growing field. And that's the second area I'd like to talk about. In the pediatric dentistry timeline found on monstersmouth.org, it actually it informed me, at least, and now I'm informing you, of the fact that the first pediatric dentist office was opened in 1910, but the American Dental Association didn't recognize them as a specialty until the 1940s. I just think this is really interesting because you would think that they'd totally hop on board to focus solely on kids, but it took a while for everyone to be okay with that. By the 1960s, we were finally getting sealants introduced to children to help prevent cavities because, well, that's when sugary drinks popped up and processed foods and Twinkies and Kool-Aid and all that. And they realized, if we stop this now at a younger age, we're going to be able to fix them. more quickly and they're going to be healthier later on. Since the 1990s, however, tooth decay has gotten a lot worse, again, because of the increase of sugary drinks and stuff. But by having it being prevalent for so long and it becoming a more popular thing, I mean, I know I personally went to a general dentist, but I'm hoping to become a pediatric dentist because I see how important it is. Pediatric dentistry now is shaping the way that kids view oral hygiene in general. One example of that would be like, I don't know if any of you had the cool little toothbrush, you know, that like sang a song whenever you brush your teeth. Mine was Hannah Montana. And like, if you pressed the right, like the right pressures whenever you could hear the music playing, so you knew you were brushing your teeth the right way. Or the Listerine Agent Cool Blue staining stuff, like the staining liquid. It would stain all your teeth blue, and so you'd have to brush until it went away, so that way you would get all the plaque off your teeth. And so that's just made dentistry and oral hygiene a lot more fun for kids, which is really important because if it's not fun, they're not going to really want to do it. The other thing that the pediatric dentist field has done, just like the pediatric hospitals, is that they've made it a open and inviting place. They prepare the kids like, this is what we're going to do, and it's not scary, I promise, I'm nice. And just, it's making children across the world being more willing to go and like to the dentist or to the doctor, so when they grow up, when they're on their own, they're not dreading going, which I think is really important. And then just how pediatric dentistry affected me, I went to Heidi Hartman Orthodontics, which I think was great because like you walk in and it just looked like an ocean, which is really cool. So braces sucked. Like, I'm not going to say they didn't, but it was just a lot more inviting to have that option. So just talking about these two different types of healthcare facilities, and there's a ton like outside of this that I've just decided to talk about, but this community is working towards the obvious goal of bettering the health of children. And it takes on many different forms, but they all, whether it's a doctor, a volunteer, or a dentist, or any other type of specialist in the pediatric area, they all understand the importance of focusing on the child and focusing on how their body is different from the adult body. And by handling them specially and carefully and kind of in a way like gently, like you can't just like tell them like the sickness they have. You have to explain it to them in words that they understand. It's bettering the child's view of the world and the view of healthcare and honestly their experience. They don't have the horrible, like dreaded stories about their teeth and getting them pulled and hating the dentist. And I think that's just really important and really rewarding to know that we're changing the way that the world overall views healthcare because we're changing them at a young age.